Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for this really special, important training on credit score empowerment for you and your clients. I am very confident that you will be glad you registered and took the time to attend because there are some new and exciting and different things happening with credit scores. And our speaker has given trainings for us in the past, and he is an absolutely wonderful presenter and has so much to share with us. And those of you who join us on a regular basis know that we always have polls to keep it interactive. But after my rehearsal with Rod yesterday, I said, I think we'll just give him a lot of time because I think people are going to have lots of questions. So here we go. This is our guest speaker, Rod Griffin, and he just seems to know everything there is, if that's possible, about credit scores. And I love listening to him and learning from him. And I think you're going to also. But before I turn this over to him, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. We have messages in the chat box. Lots of people want copies of our slides, but they are proprietary. We don't share them, but we do put the recording up on the website, on our Facebook page, and our YouTube channel. So there's lots of places where you can revisit everything you're going to hear about today. You can type your questions into the question box, and we will answer as many as time permits at the end of this training. There are no CEs or certificates of attendance, just lots of great content today. I like to begin with our financial social work affirmation. It really summarizes what I think financial social work is about. It goes just for today. I will love myself enough to face my fears, practice self-acceptance, and embrace hope. Just for today, I will silence my inner critic, speak my truth, and make peace with myself and my past. I will give myself permission to eliminate toxic people, beliefs, and behaviors from my life. And just for today, I will prepare for a better tomorrow by healing my relationship with my money and with myself. I always like to ask our attendees to take in a deep breath and slowly let it out. We are talking about money, and everyone's feelings, thoughts are very different, but often in need of just some centering and deep breathing before delving into the subject. So, with that said, let's get started. We know that no one chooses to have money problems, but that most people do. So why is that? Of course, I've been asking myself that question for 25 years, and I'll share very quickly just a few things that I've learned and that I believe, and that would be that we have rampant financial illiteracy in this country. We just continue to raise generation after generation of financially illiterate men and women. And there's lots of fingers that can be pointed and lots of reasons. We can't go into all of them now, but I call this the cycle of financial illiteracy. It begins with the fact that money causes so many financial problems, so much stress and trauma. And those problems and stress or trauma are avoided and ignored. It's kind of believed to be a form of self-care. If we ignore them, they can't stress us. However, we do know that's not true, and that this avoidance leads to physical, mental, emotional, psychological, and social problems. So that step of self-sabotaging, where we avoid and deny the problems, creates a money disconnect that leads to greater problems escalating and then spiraling out of control. And this is another view of what that actually looks like. And that's the fact that children grow up watching their parents make poor financial decisions, and they themselves receive minimal teaching, and they internalize those observed habits and develop limited financial literacy, and they become the adults who have the same problems and don't feel competent or confident about teaching their own children more about financial health and wellness. And it's because money is always the elephant in the room. It's still a very taboo topic. We don't talk about it, and there aren't very many places where people feel safe or that they won't be judged if they do talk about it. And financial health and wellness are about much, much, much more than dollars, cents, debt, math, and budgets. So, what happens with financial illiteracy? Well, some of the outcomes are that clients don't pay their bills, they get trapped in payday loans, they don't know their credit score, they may not even know what a credit score is, they don't open their mail or email bills, they disconnect from their money, they only make minimum payments, they purchase wants instead of needs, they blame money for all of their problems, they trust their financial future to someone else. They don't have a personal savings and spending plan, also known as budget. And they spend money they can't afford to impress others. They have no savings. They may get trapped in co-signing a loan for someone else. All of these things are addressed through financial social work, and they're important to know. They may ignore their student debt, not have an estate plan, be living paycheck to paycheck, borrowing against their home or their retirement plan, not preparing for retirement, not having an emergency fund, living on debt, buying more house than they can afford, or borrowing more than is needed for their student loans. All of it does contribute to poor financial behavioral health, because the stress and the trauma, the problems, they affect us physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially. They affect every area of our lives. And that's what financial social work is about. It is the intersection of politics, the economy, social work, economic, gender, and social justice. Financial social work explores financial health fundamentals, the thoughts, feelings, attitudes, beliefs, and experiences that we all have and that drive our financial behavior, how we spend, save, share, borrow, earn. It is a behavioral model because until and unless behavior changes, nothing changes. And at the heart of my work is healing the relationship we each have with our money and the relationship we have with ourselves, because we need to feel good about ourselves. We need to have hope, and we need to understand that we can change. There are tools and skills and information that can help everyone to change. So it is about self-discovery, self-care, self-healing, and it's about recognizing and taking ownership of your financial health. Financial social work model is interactive, reflective, and strength-based, educational, motivational, and supportive, holistic, multidisciplinary, and healing. Very hopeful and helpful, and it works with individuals as well as with groups. And that is why after 25 years, we have graduates around the country and around the world. And we're happy about that. But we're particularly happy to have Rod Griffin with us. And I am going to turn this over to Rod, who can tell you about himself and get you started.
Well, thank you, Rita. And if I can get my screen to share, we'll be in good shape. It's going to be stuck.
Technology, technology, technology.
Why is it not letting me share?
Okay, Leah, that's where we talk about we should have Rod's presentation.
I just changed to Rod. Rod, you should have.
There
now.
we go.
You have it, Rod?
Now you should be able to see my screen.
I don't. Do you, Leah?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. How come I don't? It doesn't matter. Go ahead, Rod.
The head of the program can't, but we hope everyone else can. Thank you for the very kind introduction and for setting the bar so high. It would be nice if you'd say, he does okay, and then clear the bar. But I'll do my very best. And it is an interesting time in the credit reporting and credit scoring world and in finance for all of us. We're seeing inflation rates that are higher than they've been since I was in junior high school, so peaking at more now than they were in 1981. So, money is becoming front and center for a lot of what we do. I have a lot of information I want to cover today and kind of lay it out in this way. We'll talk a little bit about the basics just to cover them. I always like to do that in the event that there are people who are new to the conversation. I want to talk a bit about the key credit reporting and scoring fundamentals, and how credit reporting works, how scoring works, and how they differ. So I'll spend a few minutes there. And then I want to talk about how Experian is working to empower consumers and recent develops in the credit reporting world that give people greater control over the information in their credit reports and therefore help them improve their credit scores. And then talk a bit about some of the issues and topics that we're seeing generally, a bit about public records and how that's changed in recent years in credit reports, some new developments in medical collections in credit reporting. I'll talk a bit about synthetic identity theft and what that is and what it means, and a bit about buy now, pay later programs and how that affects or doesn't affect credit reports and scores, and what it can mean from a financial perspective. So as we go along, as Rita said, if you want to enter questions in the question box, and I hope I will not take too much time, we'll leave some time to answer any questions you have as we go through the program. So jumping right in, the kind of fundamentally, the thing to know about credit reporting, and most people are aware that there are three national credit reporting companies, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. One thing I often hear from groups is, what about that breach? And from several years ago, and I point out, just to be clear, that was not Experian, that was the other E, but they were attacked. Something most people don't know, and that is pretty well accepted, is that it was an attack on Equifax by a state-sponsored group, meaning it was a government attack from a nefarious nation. The theories are likely North Korea or China, from what I've heard, but it's not like there was a high school kid in the basement of his parents' house that tried to breach credit reporting. It also didn't breach their credit reporting system, but I point that out just to kind of give a sense of the environment we face today, that it's not just individuals who are trying to capture some information. There are actually governments that are attacking businesses and doing very nefarious things, which kind of will go to the conversation around synthetic ID theft in a bit. And there are very organized, highly skilled crime rings and others that we're fighting every day. And there were good people who lost their jobs and a lot of damage done. And we at Experian don't, we want to compete fairly, put it that way, with our competitors, and we don't want that to happen to us or to them. So kind of an aside in the conversation, but when people think about the credit reporting companies, it's usually in the sense of having not been approved for an application of some kind, they've been declined, and so they call us and they're upset. What people don't realize is that because we have a national automated credit reporting system, it really powers our economy and helps people get credit and other financial services they need at much lower rates and less expensively and much faster than anywhere else in the world. Without our credit reporting system, we wouldn't have instant credit available, so you couldn't walk up to the counter or apply online and get approved right away and perhaps take savings as a result, or be able to move forward with a purchase. Even things like buying a car now takes a matter of hours as opposed to what used to be days. We wouldn't be able to get credit at the rates we see here. For example, in most parts of the world, you can't buy a house for 3% interest. It's significantly higher. In the US, because we have a national credit reporting system, credit card companies are able to manage risk and so offer better rates. In the US, the average interest rate is somewhere around 17% right now for a credit card. Doesn't sound fantastic, but when you look at other parts of the world, that interest rate is closer to 27% on average. So, and that's in the developed world. So it's considerably less expensive to access credit in the US and use it. We make credit available nationwide. In the past, with community-based credit reporting, when there were a person named Jim Chilton who really invented the credit reporting system in Dallas, which happens to be where I live, in the late 1800s, he went from merchant to merchant and took notes in a notebook. That grew into our national credit reporting system today, which is clearly automated and computer-based, which lets us enable you to move from one part of the country to another, to move from Los Angeles to New York, for example, or New York to Los Angeles, and that credit history stays with you to work for you if you manage it well. So you can set up your life in that new city. In the past, if you moved from one city to another, one community to another, you lost any access to credit because it was based on personal relationships with the merchants in that community, the businesses there. And that wasn't that long ago. In the 1930s or 40s, for example, that was still the case. So less than 100 years ago. In fact, probably closer to the 1960s when Cy Ramos computerized the credit reporting system. He was the R in TRW, which then spun off Experian, and we became public in the late 1990s. So we make credit available nationwide. We also make it possible to use credit for just about any purchase. We wouldn't always recommend that, of course, but you can, depending on your particular needs. And that wasn't always the case either. And the thing I stress most here is that when you have a credit history, you should use it just like you do other account management tools. So things like your bank statements or your credit card statements each month. You should check your credit report regularly and use it to help you manage your finances better. You can get your credit report as often as you like. It doesn't affect credit scores in any way. You can get it free. There's really rarely any purpose or reason to pay for a credit report because they're free through annualcreditreport.com now once a week through the end of this year, through the end of December. You can enroll in a free monitoring service like we have at Experian and other places as well. Get a free report once a month or more often, get a free score from Experian, a FICO 8 score, so you can know what that information is. Getting your report can help alert you to issues you might have with accounts. It can alert you to potential identity theft. So use it as a financial tool. Don't be afraid to look at it, know what's in it, and own it and make it part of your financial management system. That and process, that's really critical. So knowing kind of who the three of us, the big three they call us, are, the other question that I run into is, what do you do exactly? I hear all sorts of things about what people believe credit reporting companies do. They think that we approve or decline credit. They think that we determine whether a person has a good credit history or a poor credit history. People think that we decide what score should be assigned, or what that score means in terms of credit risk, or whether a lender should say that's a good score or a bad score. We don't do any of those things, actually. As a credit bureau or a credit reporting company or a credit reporting agency, you're going to hear all those terms and all the same thing, but we collect and store information in a way that can then be effectively checked out by a lender and used to help them make those lending decisions. So we don't make judgments about the information in a credit report. Our responsibility is to accurately show in the report what lenders tell us is in their records, so that you can have a complete record of that and see what they're reporting, and so that they can then use the information to make decisions as to whether or not a person meets their lending requirements. So we're kind of like a library in that sense. A library collects books, stores them in a way that can then be checked out if you have a library card. With a credit reporting company, we collect information from thousands of sources, compile it into a format that can then be used effectively to help manage risk, and we store it so that it can be checked out if a business has a library card, what we call a permissible purpose under federal law. And these are those purposes, so that you have a clear sense of who can get a credit report and under what circumstances. And this is under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. These are the only times that a credit report can be accessed, and pretty limited. To open or manage credit accounts, kind of makes sense that you would get a report when you're in that process. To make pre-screened, or what we call pre-approved offers of credit. So if you get a pre-approved offer of credit, I always tell people, be proud, because that means you're managing your credit well and that they want you to be a customer. The other thing I tell people is that the most powerful word in credit is two little letters, N-O, no. You can always say no. And if you're using pre-approved offers, for example, it can be a powerful consumer tool, a tool to help you expand your financial opportunity, because they open the marketplace nationally and they create competition among business for you, which serves to your advantage if you use them well. You can always say no, but if you get an offer that makes sense for you, lower interest rates, no annual fees, discounts on purchases, airline miles, whatever the incentives might be, I always tell people, weigh the incentives for that credit agreement as much as you do the credit limit, for example. Understand that using credit is a financial tool. That's the financial problem. And you should use credit as a financial advantage and avoid debt. That's kind of the tricky part, but the important part. So take advantage of those pre-approved offers. You can opt out. You can call 1-888-567-8688, 1-888-5-OPT-OUT. You can opt out. There's a website as well, and you can mail. I think it's, I always forget the website. I get it mixed up. So I think it's www.optoutprescreen, or it might be prescreenoptout.com. It's one of those. So I always flip those words around somehow. So you can opt out if you don't want the pre-approved offers from the credit bureaus. We'll take you out of that system. For employment purposes, and it's important to stress several things here, employers can get a copy of your credit report only after they get written permission from you. It's the only instance where written permission, what we call express written permission, is required for a credit report to be accessed. It's a very limited version of your credit report, so we remove anything that would violate Equal Employment Opportunity Act regulations or other employment regulations and laws. We also remove things like account numbers. Businesses don't need to know that, employers don't. And so what they get is typically a list of your identifying information and then account information you're paying on time or late. Employers never, ever get credit scores. And that's an important thing to understand, because I see in the media and other places quite often that your credit scores can prevent you from getting a job. It's absolutely not true. Employers never get credit scores. They get a limited version of your credit report. The other thing to know is that employers use reports for typically two reasons. The majority of employers do use reports, not always for the majority of jobs. So that's important to understand as well. When they do use a credit report in a hiring decision, it's typically for a position that's managing the company's money in some way, which kind of makes sense. They want to see that you're managing your money well if you're going to manage the company's money. So you're an accountant in finance. If you're doing trainings for a credit bureau, they check my report from time to time. I should have a good credit history and manage my credit well if I'm going to talk to other people about how to do it. The other reason they use it is for identity verification. So if you're applying for a job, they'll take your credit report identity information and match it to your application identification or your resume to verify that you are who you say you are. That's important because it can actually be used to, one, prevent employment fraud generally, but also it's a security measure that can protect the public. One of the examples I always give is that I live in Texas, and in Houston there are chemical plants that have produced really dangerous chemicals. So they will use credit reports to match to the application information to verify a person is who they say they are, because they don't want to have someone apply fraudulently and get a job that could endanger the public. So those are the two reasons we typically see credit reports used for employment purposes. To underwrite insurance in most states, there are several now, I think 3 that now prohibit that. However, when you see that, it's been in the law since 1972, I believe, since it was first written. And they use credit scores. They're unique to the insurance agency. They're in industry, struggling today. They are specifically designed for insurance purposes. They're not the same scores that a lender uses to predict credit repayment risk. So they're insurance scores, but they're looking at your credit history to determine 2 things. One is your ability to pay the premium each month. So credit-like, it's a financial transaction. And the other is the likelihood that you will make a financial claim. So it's not predicting you'll have a car wreck. It's predicting that you'll make a financial claim for some reason. So those are the 2 reasons we see that. Can you still, Rita, can you still see my screen, or can everybody see my screen?
Leah, can you answer
yes.
that?
Okay,
We on the slide 5.
On slide 5, yes. I had something popped up on my screen that said sharing was paused. So wanted to make sure I didn't do something. So underwriting insurance is about those financial transactions. So it's been in the law since it was written. A business transaction initiated by the consumer means you've applied for credit, and it makes sense. A court order or federal grand jury subpoena, of course, we're going to respond to. Valuation of a risk of an investor. So if you say that you're going to buy well, let's use this example. You're going to buy a certain online social communications platform, and you're the richest man in the world. It probably won't need to check your credit report if you've been watching the news. But if you go to a startup and say, I want to buy your startup, I'll pay you $1 million for it. They can check your credit report and say, hey, you owe $3 million in debt, so probably can't buy my company. Not a problem for Elon Musk, I don't think. It's going to be interesting. So evaluating the risk of an investor. Eligibility for certain government licenses as well. That includes things like security clearances, for example. So if you are serving in the U.S. Armed Forces, or you are in a position that requires a security clearance or needs a review, they will check it. So if you're serving in the military, have family members who are or at a government position, they may check your credit history. And of course, disclosure to you as a consumer. You can get your credit report as often as you like. It does not affect credit scores when you do, doesn't affect lending decisions. So you don't have to worry about that. And again, in most cases, a credit report's free. If you exhaust all of the free reports you're entitled to, a credit report now costs $13.50. I haven't talked to anybody who's paid $13.50 for a credit report in ever. Or anyone who's actually purchased an individual report in years and years. So you shouldn't need to pay for a report in most cases. So understanding who the credit bureaus are and who can get a copy. The next question is always, well, who is involved in that process? Why in the world am I getting this? Just a moment. I don't know why I'm.
Leah, can you still see
my
his
screen?
Can you still see his screen, Leah?
Yes.
Very
Rod,
odd.
what notification?
So it's on my end. So these are the people who are involved in the credit reporting process. In credit reporting companies, clearly, we collect and store that information and distribute it when a company has a permissible purpose. Lenders use the information, as do some other businesses, things like renting an apartment, for example. Leasing companies may review credit reports. Utility companies may review credit reports in determining your ability to pay the deposits. Risk score modelers are critical. They are the people who develop the credit scores. They own the formulas and create the formulas that are used to evaluate the information in the credit report. So people know the names but don't realize they're a separate process. So FICO, for example, is the best known credit scoring company. Vantage Score is a competitor. Many lenders have their own scoring systems. So would get your report and they have their own scoring models. They're the ones who own those scores. So when you hear about a FICO score, they're called a FICO score because they are FICOs with an apostrophe S score. They belong to FICO. The credit report and credit score are two different things. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. And of course, the government, we're very regulated at both the federal and state level. In fact, there was a county regulation at one point that governed credit reporting as well. Everything from what can be in a credit report and who can get a copy of it, how long it remains, to the font or typeface and the size of the font if we print a report. So very heavily regulated. And you as a consumer are at the center of that cycle. You determine as a consumer what goes into that credit report. What kind of credit are you going to apply for? How often are you going to apply? Are you going to provide your full identifying information, which we hope you do because that helps us match the information? Are you going to use different nicknames? I always talk about my dad. He would always tell me every year, he'd get his report, say, have the correct name, but you should only have that name, but you have others. How do I get them removed? His name was Adrian Dale Griffin. And that was there in his report, but so was Adrian Griffin and Dale Griffin and A.D. Griffin and Adrian D. Griffin and A. Dale Griffin, but he'd applied for credit using all of those names. So all of them were listed. So that's critical. And that's the first information that comes to Experian is the identifying information from your application. So we always encourage people to be complete and thorough and consistent in the way you apply. And speaking of what goes into a credit report, again, identifying information is the first thing you'll see. It's going to include your name, your address, your social security number, your date of birth, previous addresses, and any variations of those things. When you see people say, and I've seen media reports say that, that there are lots of errors and most of them are the variations in the identifying information, those aren't errors. We list all of those variations intentionally. We're going to show your social security number, for example. We don't have access to Social Security Administration records. So as a result, we will if a different social security number appears, we're going to list both of them. So if you have 9 accounts or 10 accounts and 9 of them are reported with one social security number and one is different, we're going to list both of them because we don't want to guess and be wrong. We don't want to find out that that social that was different was actually the result of fraud. We want to make sure we show that for you. Same thing is true of addresses and name variations. We show all of those so that you can have a complete record. Account information, of course, is at the heart of your credit report. It's all of those credit agreements you have. It can be installment loans. It can be revolving accounts, which are just credit cards. It can be charge accounts that look like credit cards, but you have to pay the balance in full each month. It could be today things like cell phone payments, positive cell phone payments, I should stress, positive utility payments, positive streaming service payments like Netflix or Hulu. It could be an auto loan or mortgage loan. We're going to show all of that information. We're also going to show your association with that account. So are you the primary account holder, a joint account holder, an authorized user, and so on. So we're going to show that relationship. We're going to show the specific details of that account. If it's an installment loan, we're going to show the principal loan amount. We're going to show the balance remaining. We're going to show the payment due. We're going to show whether you paid that bill on time or if it's late. If it's a credit card, we're going to show the credit limit. We're going to show the current balance as reported to us. We're going to show the payment history. Are the payments late or are they on time? If they're late, how late are they? And we would also show if the account is charged off, that status. You'll see a payment status is current, open, active. You might see closed or charged off. If it's charged off as a loss, you might also see that a note saying the account was sold to or transferred to, and then a collection account. And that collection account would show transferred from or acquired from, purchased from, something like that. So you can track the history of that debt from its beginning to its end, because your credit report is a credit history. By far the most important information is that payment history. Is the account paid on time or is it late? You will also see bankruptcy public records in your credit report, but no others. Bankruptcy is now the only public record, Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. About 3 years ago now, I think it was roughly, we removed as an industry all of the other public records that were in a credit report. So things like tax liens that were paid or unpaid were removed. Civil judgments, if you're sued and you lose, we took those off reports. There are no parking tickets or library fines, anything like that in a credit report. The only public record today is bankruptcy, and because it's debt related. Inquiries, of course, are part of a report. They're simply a record of who's looked at that credit history. There are two types. It's important to understand. The first is what we call hard inquiries. They are the result of your application for credit. So they indicate potential new debt that doesn't yet show as an account in your credit history. And so indicate some risk, and that can affect credit scores very minimally. They are the least important factor in credit scores. The other inquiries are soft inquiries. They are everything else. So getting your own report, reviews by existing lenders, pre-approved or pre-screened credit offers, reviews for insurance or employment purposes. Those are all soft inquiries. They only show to you. They're not shown to anyone else, and they don't affect credit scores in any way. So you don't have to worry about those. They're there as a record for you to see. And dispute instructions, of course. How do you contact us to dispute information if you find something you believe to be inaccurate or if it's fraudulent? It's really simple. Go to Experian.com/dispute and follow the instructions. If you have a copy of your current report, I should say current copy of your credit report, you'll be able to enter that number, the report number, into your report, and we will pop it up on screen. It's a secured, encrypted system. If not, provide some information. We'll give you a free copy of your report. So you'll be able to then just follow the instructions, click the button next to what you need to dispute, and follow those steps. Very easy to do. So what's not in a credit report? Anything that's not debt related, pretty simple. No criminal background, no medical information, except medical collections. We remove anything that would violate HIPAA, the Health Insurance Privacy and Accountability Act, HIPAA. So there's nothing about who provided the treatment, what you were treated for, who the medical collection company is on the report that a lender gets. On your personal report, we will show the name of that medical collection company or lender so that you can contact them if you need to. We'll also show contact information for you, but not them. There's nothing about buying habits or transaction data. So we don't know what you buy. When you use, say, a credit card, for example, your balance might go up, but we wouldn't see what you used that purchase for. There's nothing about assets in a credit report, nothing about income or bank accounts. So things like savings accounts, checking accounts, CDs, IRAs, not part of a credit report. They're using a credit report as a lender to predict or evaluate what we call your propensity to repay. meaning the likelihood you'll repay, not your ability to repay. They will, as a lender, get asset information. So they'll get check stubs, they'll get employment records, whatever they need, savings accounts, investments, to verify that you have assets to pay the debt. Your credit report helps them determine whether you will pay the debt. And they're two different things. They're both two sides of that coin. And so just because you have $1 million in the bank doesn't mean you'll use it to pay your bills on time. And so they're trying to determine both of those things. Credit scores also are not part of a credit report. They're actually a separate process from credit reporting. They're a tool used to evaluate the information in the report. And quickly run through this slide. How long does information stay in a report? Pretty straightforward. Open accounts that are in good standing, never been late, remain indefinitely. And so as long as they're open and active, they'll be part of a credit report. Closed accounts that have no negative information in it in the history will remain for 10 years from the date it's reported closed. We keep the good stuff longer than the bad stuff. Late payments remain 7 years from the date of the missed payment, what we call the delinquency date. If you miss a payment and then you miss another payment and you continue to miss payments, you fall behind, you never catch up, the account's charged off as a loss, and it goes to collections. That collection account is deleted 7 years from the original delinquency date from the original debt. So we treat collections as a continuation of the debt from the original account. So the original account and the collection account are deleted at the same time. Collection agencies must report that original delinquency date, the first time it was late, from that original account as a matter of federal law. They can't change it. You can pay a collection agency, you can negotiate with a collection agency, you can work with them. It will not reset the clock. There are lots of other dates in the report, things like most recent update date, most recent reported date, most recent payment date. None of those affect when an account is deleted from the credit report. It's that original delinquency date. It's a really important date to understand. Chapter 7, bankruptcy remains for 10 years from the filing date because you don't repay any of the debt. And Chapter 13 remains for 7 years because you do repay part of the debt. So it doesn't stay quite as long. And inquiries remain for 2 years as a matter of law. They really only affect scores if they do at all for a matter of a couple of months, because after that period of time, 2 or 3 billing cycles, there's going to be a new account that becomes the risk indicator. Or if there's no new account, the inquiry doesn't represent risk, so it doesn't affect scores anymore. And FICO tells us they remove inquiries, or rephrase that. FICO tells us they exclude inquiries from the score calculation after 12 months. So even though they're still in the report, they don't affect scores. So that gets us to credit scores. And what are they? Well, they're simply a tool that's used to evaluate the information in a credit report. There are lots of different scores. You have 3 credit reports, hundreds of different credit scores. The credit reporting company may route your report through a scoring model that what we call resides in our system, or that is housed there. So FICO rents a space from us, basically, if you think about kind of like an apartment complex. And when they ask for your report, or ask for Rod Griffin's report, we compile the report, route it through the keyhole into that space. A score is calculated, and the report and the score go out the window on the other side to the lender in parallel. It looks like the score is part of the report because they can tell us when they get it. We want the report identifying information first, and then the scores, and then the rest of the report to show on our screen or when it's printed. So it can look like the score is part of the report. In fact, it's not. Scores can also be calculated after we send the report to the lender, so they may do their own scores, and we're not involved at all as a credit reporting company. In mortgage lending, we'll send reports to a third-party mortgage reporting company. They do the score calculations and send all of it to the lender, and we don't see scores either. So several ways that can happen, and you have lots of different scores. If you enroll in Experian's premium service, which is the one perk I get, for example, you get 6 or 7 different FICO scores. And I can tell you that my highest FICO score is 899. Checked it today. But I also have an 850 and an 833 and several others. The scores are pretty sound, but they're different depending on the type of lender and the type of lending that the scores are designed for. So a credit score for a credit card will be different than a score for an auto loan, so buying a car. FICO scores specifically for auto lending go to 900 instead of 850. So I always tell people, don't compare the numbers, and if all you have is a number, you can't really do anything about it. So what do? Well, the thing to know is that every time a credit score is generated, a series of risk factors are generated as well, and they tell you exactly what from your report you need to work on to make that score better. And unlike the numbers that can be very different, the risk factors are very consistent. And so if you work on the risk factors from one, all of your scores will get better. That may be the most important thing I can tell you about scores. I'll just touch on a couple of things here. The other thing to know is that there are two things that really matter with scores. Your payment history, you're paying on time. With Vantage Score 3.0, that's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% of the score. Utilization rate, your balances on your credit card, is the second most important factor. Here it's broken out into two pieces. It's total utilization, which is about 20% of the score. Set up all of your credit card balances and all of your credit limits and divide. Another 11% is the balances as compared to limits on individual accounts. So that's about 30%, 31%. You'll see the same, roughly the same breakouts for FICO scores as well. So if you pay your bills on time, keep your balances low, you're going to have good credit scores. Really the only secret to scores. I want to touch on Experian Boost. So when we talk about scores, and I mentioned things like utilities and cell phone payments and streaming services, 3 years ago, we launched Experian Boost. It's a service that lets you proactively have your positive cell phone payments, your positive utility payments, things like natural gas, water, electricity, and your positive streaming services for things like Netflix or Hulu reported in your credit history as accounts. And to do that, you simply go to Experian.com/boost. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes. And you give us permission to capture those payments from the account you pay them through. So it's savings account or checking account or credit card. And each month we would add a cell phone account if you had asked to add that, a gas bill if you had that, and a Netflix bill. So you could have 3 accounts. We can capture up to 2 years of payment history, so 24 months. And what we're hearing from people is when they do that, especially if they have thin credit files, fewer than 5 accounts, short credit history, or they have had some issues and have scores of less than 680, but have been turning things around, we're seeing improvement for 2 out of 3 people on average of about 12 or 13 points. And for people with those thin files or lower scores, closer to 19 points. So it's been a really powerful tool for people who are rehabilitating their credit history. And they affect all scores are become part of the credit report, unless the Boost information, because it's new, would have a negative impact on scores because they're older models, what we call models or formulas, particularly in the mortgage industry. So we don't include that information in scores that are used for mortgage lending because that can adversely affect them because they're old and outdated and they don't incorporate the information correctly. The newest scores from FICO and Vantage Score, the most common scores do, and so you would see them automatically affected. Another thing that we've just introduced in the last month or so is called Experian Go. So if you have no credit history at all and no one who can be a cosigner, no one who can be as an authorized user, if you enroll in our free app and don't have a credit history, we will create one for you. You simply follow the instructions that are provided, and we'll use your identifying information that you provide along with a picture of a government issued ID and a selfie that's a live selfie, so you can smile and wink so we know you're really there, and verify your identity. We'll create a credit report. We know that there are about 28 million credit invisible consumers, meaning they have no credit history in the US. We know that communities of color are more adversely affected. About 26% of Black and Hispanic consumers have no credit history. So it's really critical to helping people overcome barriers to financial inclusion, to achieving financial success. Once you've established that credit history, you can go through Experian Boost and enroll in that service in many cases. We also are working with Capital One and Pedal to offer an introductory credit card if you qualify, or go through their process. For some people, we also offer we kind of force you to get some education along the way about how credit reporting works and scores work and that sort of thing. But brand new tool, really proving to be effective. As I mentioned, you just download our app and follow the instructions. And so those are the kind of key things you need to know about credit reporting itself. I want to touch on a few things that are emerging. Recently, there was an announcement from the credit reporting industry about medical collections and how we're going to be treating them. Medical collections, medical debts really only appear in a credit report now when they become a collection, and only after that collection is 180 days or about 6 months old. So we hold them before we put them in a report. The reason we started doing that several years ago was to make sure that the medical collection wasn't the result of a billing error or of an insurance dispute, things like that, that it was a legitimate collection account. We just announced in the last few weeks that effective July 1 of 2022, any paid medical collections will be removed from credit reports across the Bureau. So we're going to take them out of credit reports. We are also increasing the time that we'll effectively hold a medical collection to 1 year from 6 months. And in 2023, we're going to begin to remove any medical collections that are less than $500. We found that one, scores have changed, so they treat medical collections differently. In fact, paid collections for most scores are now ignored for matters of purposes of calculating a score. And so we're able to remove that information, and removing the smaller medical collections is going to help people who need help and not going to adversely affect lending decisions. So we're going to be doing that as well. So we're hoping that that's going to be very effective. We started actually having this discussion months ago, and we're able to announce it just in the last couple of weeks. So medical debts are going to be different. Rita asked me to touch on synthetic identity theft as well, and it's really an interesting thing. Synthetic identity, for those who don't know, is
But Rod, we're running really late. I'm sorry.
We're running out of time?
Yes. Do this one very quickly and the next one.
Okay, synthetic ID is when your identity is stolen along with lots of other people, and they take pieces of it and create a false person. And then they create some fictional stuff as well, and they use that identity to create what looks like a real person, and they will use it to apply for credit. One of the things that they do, and it's usually very sophisticated fraud rings, they will actually create false identity, synthetic IDs, to steal cars, high-end cars. So they'll go to a Ferrari dealership, apply using false checking account statements and billing statements and employment stubs with a false ID, and drive away with the car before the lender or the car dealer realizes that they're not who they say they are. So huge issue. The thing to know is, because they're synthetic, they don't really show up on other individuals on your credit report, because they might use your first name and somebody else's last name. They can use other information. So they generally don't affect credit reports. They sometimes create what we call ghost files, and we're getting better. We've had initiatives to remove them, and we're getting better at catching it. It can be really hard to do. Buy now, pay later, I'd love to spend more time on, but I'll say this. It's new. It's the Wild West of credit. It's very inconsistent. There's no oversight, no regulation. As bureaus, we're trying to figure out how we include it, because there are debts. The research is showing that a person who has a buy now, pay later loan actually on average has 5, and that they can be as much as $500 per loan. So it could be significant levels of debt. They're not reported currently. The bureaus are taking different approaches. Experian has found that because of the way buy now, pay later works, it almost always has a negative effect on credit scores when it's incorporated into traditional credit data or credit reports. So we are creating a separate credit bureau for buy now, pay later data, so that lenders and others can capture that information and include it in their decisions, but not adversely affect traditional credit reporting systems and scores. The other bureaus are taking a different approach. So we'll see how that works. We really don't know yet. It's so new, but it's really popular. Things like debt stacking, where people are using lots of buy now, pay later and building, stacking up debts, and no one can see it. So it's a really interesting issue. And then some resources, happy to share, annualcreditreport.com, and then our Experian.com/consumer education site, which also includes a new flip book. And from there, I will stop talking, even though I can say a whole lot more, and I can stick around a bit longer if it would help.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for that. Now let's see if I can get it back. I'm not sure that I can. Let's see, audience view.
Where's my stop sharing button?
Okay. I'm not
I
sure.
will try to change you to presenter reader.
Okay.
No, you're presenter now.
I'm the presenter now. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm going to assume I'm the presenter. Can you see me, Leah?
Mm-mm.
Yes or no?
Actually, no, actually not. Can you do what you're doing normally by yourself? Probably it will help. But it said that you presenter, but I still can see Rob's screen.
There is a problem with the technology today. I know that. Well,
Very odd. It won't let me. It won't let me not share my screen. So very odd.
okay, so too bad Rod doesn't have my presentation, and neither do you, Leah. Okay, I'll just talk people through it. The fact that, you know, no one needs to know everything about money, but everyone needs to know certain things about money. And those are the things that we try to address through these monthly free webinars, through financial social work certification. Next
You
month,
can try now.
what?
Now you presenter. You can try now. You a presenter now.
Well, I have my screen up. Can anybody see it? Can you see it, Leah?
No, it's just said you presenter.
Well,
Okay.
okay. I just want to tell people that our free webinar next month is on the financial and emotional costs of cancer. The one after that is couples and money, creating an authentic financial partnership. So you can find those on our website. And we have essays from graduates on the website. And we have our financial social work certification program, which is self-study and self-paced. And students have 6 months to complete. And it includes everything, 5 workbooks, the exam, a Zoom meeting every month, and our financial social work professional network. So I think we have a few questions for Rod, who did his usual wonderful training. Thank you, Rod. And you want to give those questions to Rod, Leah?
Yeah, sure. How can an eviction impact someone's credit, Rod?
Yeah, and an eviction doesn't appear in a credit report. That would have been one of those public records potentially. So it won't. There wouldn't be any record of that in a credit history.
Okay, thank you. Are there any ways to help teens prepare and give a good score earlier in their life, 18 years old?
If you're 18, Experian Go is a great place to start. And if you are 18 and becoming an adult, and you have a cell phone, for example, in your name, Experian Boost can help. From there, it's things like having an authorized user or someone add you as an authorized user, perhaps a joint account holder on a small loan to help build that credit history. But Experian Go was actually created in part because of that, the challenge of establishing credit history for the first time.
Okay, thank you. If a client has a very low credit score and deeply desire to buy a home in a year, what are the first things we should work on credit-wise?
Yeah, it's really tough. It can take some time. One, you're doing the right thing if you're getting the report and score well in advance, so you know what you need to look at. Get those risk factors, look at those, because they'll tell you what you need to focus on. In many instances, it's about building that history. As I said, Experian Boost won't feed into mortgage loan, but it can help you qualify for other accounts. So it might help you improve your score to the point where you can get a credit card, maybe a small loan. You don't want to apply for too much at once, but look at those factors. They'll tell you what you need to work on most. It might be reducing credit card debt. It might be time. That can be a challenge if you're just starting out. It might be catching up on late payments. But look at those risk factors. There are as many as 300 different factors for some scores. So you need to know exactly what's affecting your report, but time is really critical. So starting early is the best thing you can do.
Okay, when applying for a credit card or any credit account, is the credit score report pulled? If so, how badly does that affect the overall credit score?
Yeah, so if you're applying for credit, a credit card account, they will almost always check your credit report. That results in what we call an inquiry. The inquiry, though, isn't really that significant. In most cases, an inquiry is 5 points at most, and again, it's short-lived. If an inquiry has an effect that's meaningful to the decision, it's because there are other issues that are much more important already. So again, it goes to getting those risk factors, because I tell people, don't worry about the inquiries. If they're having an effect, it's because you have other issues. I actually talked to a person once who said it was the inquiries. And it turns out that they were young, they were a student, they didn't have any credit history. That was the bigger issue. So if you look at a report, I have yet in 25 years of experience to talk to a person when they said an inquiry kept me from getting a loan or a credit card. When I talked to them some more, we looked at their credit report, that was actually the case. It was always something more significant. So inquiries, the straw that can break the camel's back, to use a terrible analogy, but that's kind of, it's the last and least important thing that affects scores.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned buy now, pay later will not be calculated in their reporting. It will be reported separately. Where will it be reported?
Yeah, well, we're at Experian, we're building a Fair Credit Reporting Act compliant consumer reporting bureau with buy now, pay later payments. It's in the future a bit. We've announced we're working on it. It's going to be a bit further out. The other bureaus, Equifax and TU, are saying they're going to include buy now, pay later in their credit report. So we'll see how that develops. Buy now, pay later is so new and so popular now, and there's no regulation, there's no consistency. Lots of different companies doing it. That it's really hard to get our hands around it, for people to get their hands around. So it's going to be interesting. That's still developing.
Well, it may be interesting, but I find it very alarming, and I know you basically do too, right? Everybody, you need to know how you're going to manage multiple buy now, pay laters, because Rod, you explained it to me that they come in differently and in different ways. If you're not on top of that, they will become right, Rod. If you're delinquent on those, you're going to have financial problems.
But not even being delinquent, and that's the other interesting thing, that there are multiple companies that do buy now, pay later, and so they're like third-party vendors for online stores, brick and mortar stores. So you could take out a buy now, pay later loan at 4 different stores in a day. Your payments would go to 4 different buy now, pay later management companies. You might not you'd see them all at once. You could get, buy now, pay later loans at 2 different stores with the same management company, but you wouldn't get one bill for them, even though they're going to the same place. So it can be very easy to lose track of who you need to pay when, depending on how it's done. The real issue is it's so easy to do that you could find yourself deep in debt because you bought too many shoes and are using buy now, pay later. It's that loan stacking thing. One pair of shoes that's $100 or $150 is one thing, but when you have 10 pair and you're making payments on them, that's just something else altogether. That's not to say buy now, pay later can't be a great tool, but it's like everything else. You have to use it wisely and be careful about how you're using it. And in the credit world right now, it's the great unknown, because buy now, pay later loans don't show up anywhere. So if you're going to go apply for a car loan or a mortgage and you get a credit report, they can see your traditional credit accounts, but it's almost impossible right now to know how much debt might you have in buy now, pay later loans. So you could have thousands of dollars outstanding in buy now, pay later, and it be invisible when they're trying to determine their ability to pay a car loan. And so that creates risk, and that's a hard thing to manage.
Okay, thank you. Will all medical debt be taken out of the score sometime in the near future?
Yes, and that's what we're going to remove all paid medical collections from a credit report. And again, in a credit report, medical debt doesn't appear in the report until it's a collection account, and until that collection account is 6 months old. We're moving that out, so it will be it will have to be a year old before we add a medical collection. And any paid collections we're going to remove from the credit history. And then further out from that, probably first half of 2023, so a year and a half away, maybe a bit longer, we're going to remove any medical collections that are less than $500.
What type of tools does Experian Go use to build credit?
Yeah, so with Experian Go, it's a tool used to actually just create that credit report for the first time. So if you have no credit history at all, and we'll create one for you using your identifying information. So basically, it's a blank credit report with your identifying information. That's what Experian Go does. It gets you in the system. It makes you visible to traditional credit kinds of relationships, which means you can then begin to build credit using that credit history. And that's where Experian Boost can help, because then you can add your cell phone payments, utility payments, so on. And what our analysis is showing with Experian Go and Experian Boost is that what we think is happening is that a person who has absolutely no credit history at all, and they download our app and use Experian Go to create a credit report, they have a blank credit report, and then they enroll in Experian Boost, the average score analysis is showing that it would be somewhere around 665 on a FICO score. So you could go from having no credit history at all to having a credit history that's established and a FICO 8 credit score of 665 in about 10 or 15 minutes. That's not a great score, but it's a score. You become scoreable, and that means that you're able to move in the right direction and be able to qualify for those, the better financial services. And that's what we're trying to do.
Okay. In your opinion, what are some of the best credit cards on the market now?
Yeah, I can't really speak to specific cards.
Yeah,
there are
okay,
thousands of credit cards out there. So, I try not to sales pitches, but we do have a matching service if you enroll in our monitoring services, based on what you're looking for. But it depends on what your needs are and what you're looking for, what you plan to do. And there are thousands and thousands of them out there.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Is there a way that agencies can get access to our client credit report scores?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. Is there a way that agencies can get access to our clients' credit reports scores?
We would need to talk to our membership organization to see if we could set that up. So if you're thinking about like a counseling agency or that sort of thing.
Not a credit counseling agency. I think that the person that's asking the question is probably, after listening to your wisdom, sir, I think that they're probably wondering how they can access, if it is possible, to access a client's score and therefore consider Experian Go or Boost. I I would guess that the answer was no, but I have no idea, Rod, is it?
We would have to, we'd have to determine whether you meet those criteria under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And then from there, it becomes a financial issue. To be a member of Experian, you have to meet security requirements. You have to comply with all of the reporting standards, that sort of thing. And so it can get very expensive to be a member, to get reports directly from us. A better option might be just to have the consumer get their credit reports and scores and bring them in, because you're going to see the same information. And it's also better in that it's much easier to read and understand than a report you would get as a business, because they're the same information, but they're structured for machine readings like computers. So they're really hard to look at and decipher, because it's really designed for the computer to do that. But the consumer version is meant to be easy to read and understand. So that's often a better choice anyway.
Yes,
it also makes it easier to work with the consumer.
Yeah, that's I think what would have to happen. Well, we need to move on. Everyone has things to get to next in our very busy lives. Rod, everyone thanks you. I especially thank you. And I am putting out the invitation for 2023 so you can tell us all the new things that are happening. Thanks so much for all of this.
Well, thank you, Rita, and consider the invitation accepted. If Experian still has me, or if not, I'll still be willing to come and chat and be watching what's happening with the industry. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you all for being here and bearing with me. There's just a lot we'd like to share. So thank you all very much.
It was great. Thanks, everyone. We hope to see you back here next month. Bye now.